We're getting into our conversation for this hour, and our guest is already seated. Wakili Willis Otieno is here with us this morning. Good morning, Wakili.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm all right.
Yes.
Karibu sana.
Asante sana. Glad to be here with the city. It's long since I saw him. The man, the sage with wisdom.
Oh, wow. Do we need to give you guys a minute?
No.
Well, it gladdens my heart that two friends can connect. That's great. Thank you for being here, Wakili. Good to have you here. And a number of things are going on. IEBC selection panel started yesterday, trying to look for the position of the chairperson and then seeing what happens after that. We're going to be talking about that, restructuring the IEBC and what could actually come about to have meaningful, efficient elections in Kenya. But before we do that, let's welcome you to today's show with today's proverb. CT will tell you where he's gone this week, and then you can do us the good favor of interpreting that for us. You know the law is clear.
It's always clear.
We are in the Islamic Republic of Mauritania. Rich history. 11th, 12th century. The remnants of that particular civilization still exist, even as we speak. It was part of the trade caravan route that was a very fundamental feature in the kingdom that existed in that region for a long time. The thing about this country is this. Close to 90% of the country is the Sahara Desert. So, and yet it's actually a very rich country. It has huge oil deposits. It has, I mentioned the deposits of oil and other minerals for a simple reason. Despite the mineral resources it has, it's still one of the poorest countries on the continent and on earth. This is the terrible and painful legacy of the African continent. A wealthy continent with some of the poorest people on earth. Poor in that the governments they choose and the governments that take power never seem to prioritize the citizenry. So the citizenry, despite the natural resources that the countries have, still linger in abject and staggering poverty. The proverb, if you watch your pot, your food will not burn. Now, pot here refers to a vessel that you use for cooking. Nothing to do with your belly. It is, yes, sufria. Okay? If you watch your pot, your food will not burn.
Wakili?
It's simply, in my view, my interpretation is that this proverb is telling us that you must always pay attention to that which you are doing. You pay attention, you're able to get the best results out of it.
Absolutely.
Because you have your mind in it. This is pretty straightforward today. Thank you, Sweetie. Just give me a hand.
Wakili seems to be saying that he gave him a pass.
This one's not a pass. This one is 110 out of 100.
So folks who may not be having an easy time or will not be given a pass are those who are being interviewed by the IEBC selection panel that started yesterday. We saw a number of people then being interviewed, questioned, back and forth. And that brings into the conversation that we're having about restructuring the IEBC. It's been a long time coming. It's been 2 years since there's been a fully fledged, and when we're talking about fully fledged, we're talking about personnel without a chairperson and without commissioners. But we know that the office of the IEBC is still in existence and it is functioning for all intents and purposes. But certain things are not done because we are told there are no commissioners who then have the responsibility to activate certain of these activities. So that started yesterday. But the question has always been that with an IEBC, how then are we able to deal with transparency and fairness? That the IEBC seems to have been the battleground for elections and not just, a commission that was overseeing an election. How can we start to look at this commission now as one that is transparent and fair if we continuously have political parties involved in what it does? Let's start from that point.
The unfortunate thing about IEBC is that we've arrogated upon it responsibilities that are beyond what it should do. And the politicians, the legacy politicians, seems to have taken a position that whoever controls IEBC controls Bomas and will get his way in the elections. If I look at my experience in electoral processes, I'll tell you that for us to achieve free and fair elections, the first thing we need to pull down is Bomas. We don't need a national tallying center. When I went to court in 2015 on the Maina case, I was actually litigating Article 138(12) of the Constitution, which requires that presidential elections should be done at the constituency level. And the Court of Appeal and the High Court agreed with that position. But somewhere along the way, the implementation of that judgment has only been partially implemented. They only focus on that polling station results are final, and then you transmit them to Nairobi. The spirit of that decision was that you vote at your polling station, you count and announce at the polling station. Then you do the first tallying at your constituency tallying center. So presidential elections should be held by constituency returning officers, not the national returning officer. In fact, this position of a national returning officer, like Chebukati used to call himself, is an anathema to our laws. We don't know about it.
It doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist. His role was simply to make the declaration of the final results. So if you are to conduct elections in every constituency, remember, every polling station reports together with these ballot boxes and papers to the constituency returning officer, so that if there be any dispute, the boxes are there, the ballots are there. As you're doing the tallying, if I'm disputing one polling station, we can open the boxes and do recounts.
Why is there such a problem with Bomas?
The problem
because are we saying that by the time people leave the CTC and find their way to Bomas, something happens in between there? Is that what we are saying?
Of course, what happens is that whatever the people have decided at the polling stations, when transmitted to Bomas, and they're transmitted in thousands, it becomes something else. You know, Kenyans have never done an interrogation of what transpired with what was called the Book 2 of 2. Why did Chebukati decide to print 2 results declaration forms 34As? Two sets. One he was calling Book 1, one he was calling Book 2.
Book 2.
How many books are we supposed to have?
One.
Because they learned from 2017 a petition which again I participated in, and I was the one overseeing the scrutiny exercise of the forms, is that when the original form was brought to be scrutinized, we were able to
verify Form 34.
We were verifying 34As and 34Bs. Yeah.
Yes.
We were able to flesh out fake forms, because they had used fake forms to declare the results. What had happened to the original? The original was discarded somewhere, and a fake one was used to make the declaration of the results. So to cure and to protect himself from that theft which he had done, they came up with now 2 sets of originals, so that if they discarded the first set, they still have an original. If you go scrutiny, you will still find an original form.
But Kelly, we're talking about these things like, Dennis went to town and he bought an apple and then he came back. It's like, it's just normal behavior. It's not. We're talking about an election here, where essentially we're talking about, sacred documents, really, when it comes to an election process that should be handled in a manner that, spews integrity, spews transparency, spews fairness and justice. But it just seems as though, things are taken back and forth, and we're just wondering, okay, so...
Ndoi may be the only serious person on this subject. The full story of 2017, in my view, has not been told. If you look at the report of the registrar of the court that oversaw the scrutiny of the forms, somebody was declaring for you a president using a false cap.
Surely.
Yeah. Those are the forms that some of them...
Something that somebody has
handwritten, a false cap. It was done in such a cavalier manner that you really wonder, is this really how you're arriving at a precedent? Because what happened was, the National Tallying Center, in my view, is established purely for purposes of manipulating the vote. So they were working backwards. We have the number of forms, the votes they want to declare. So just fill it in. So you don't have time to create a perfect form. So I believe somewhere when they're doing the math, I think two constituencies, it was declared using full scalps.
What I find fascinating, since we're looking at this thing academically,
Yes.
it's very disturbing but fascinating, is this. If you listen, well, I have listened to the stories that emanated from 2008, 2007, the elections, and one hears similar stories where the results come in, and because the maths isn't adding up, somebody just says, no, cancel that one, write this. And it is then handwritten. Now, so it looks like the people who are involved in this didn't change much. We go to an election in 2017, one election, in fact, 2 elections, 2013, this is 2017, and they're doing the same thing.
The same thing.
So you ask yourself, what is it that makes people so courageous to believe that you can actually determine an election result by simply deciding this is what we're going to declare? Because that's what it amounts to.
The unfortunate bit is that all the legacy politicians, they like the system that way. Because they hope, each side hopes that it will benefit them at some point. But if you are genuine about conducting elections in this country, the first thing, as I said before, do away with the Bomas. Take the elections to the polling stations and the constituencies.
Right.
Then we follow the results constituency by constituency. So that if anybody is disputing, you are disputing a constituency return, and everybody becomes a tallying officer in their own norms. If the media is declaring for me in Mvita, these are the results for the candidates, and I'm doing my tallying. They will move now to Nyeri town, they're ready, we are noting down. So that by the time the threshold is reached, everybody knows. So the work of the chairman, he should be sitting in a boardroom, not spending 2 billion shillings hosting us on national circus.
Now that is my problem. And even now, as we're talking about restructuring the IEBC as a commission, if you ask me, does their job. But the problem here is that there is too much interference, and the interference comes largely from political parties and their people.
I will not say political parties. I'll actually say it's more
individuals.
The state. It's the state. Parties have. I've been to Bomas now, I think, in 2 elections. I've been an active participant at Bomas, just witnessing what is going on there. And I ask myself, what are we all doing here?
Why is everybody at Bomas?
It is reduced to a contest where you're looking at figures without forms. Where are the forms? Where are the ballots? Where is the primacy of the people's will? It's at the constituency level. Not a single ballot paper finds itself at Bomas.
Who tells people to go to Bomas? Does IEBC say let us all convene at Bomas?
Yes, IEBC and the commissioners in particular, once they decide to gazette the Bomas as the tallying center, the next thing they normally do is they tell the media, don't declare any results unless we release them to you.
Okay,
and
then
they've managed to bully everybody.
So then I must ask, what is the purpose of having a national tallying center if everything has already been tallied at the constituency level? What's the purpose of having an NTC?
We don't need it.
Do we need anything at the national level?
Yeah.
In my view, we do not need it. Because if you go by the spirit of the Maina case, factually the determination by the Maina case, presidential elections are done at the constituency. What we need are constituency tallying centers. And what must be present at the constituency tallying centers? Number 1 are the forms, 34As. Number 2 are the ballots supporting that form. Number 3, we have the agents and we have the observers. And the agents are coming from each polling station. And they jointly hand over the results together with the IEBC officials to the constituent returning officer. So that if there is any mischief, the agent who was in the polling station is able to say, no, what you are getting in the form is different from what we have in the box. Open the box. Everybody is there. Now, when you create the National Tallying Center, you kill that process. Because now you are giving us numbers, you're giving us figures without supporting documentation.
Okay, now, sorry. It is now mathematics, right? Because we're trying to get to the place where we see transparency and fairness here. those numbers that you now have at the constituency tallying center, you've got agents, you've got IEBC officials, you've got observers, essentially everybody that participated in the process and signed their documentation is actually present there.
Yes.
Now, what people have been asked is that the returning officer of each constituency tallying center takes that documentation and somehow finds their way by train, bus, air, land, and sea to Bomas.
Yes.
Now, whatever happens on the way has now been the bone of contention, all this. The channels for this transmission has been the problem, is it not?
No. Nduka, can I pause?
Yes, please.
We are at the constituency level.
Yes.
Okay. They are supposed to transmit results to where exactly?
To the National Tallying Center.
Yeah, so if there was no National Tallying Center, what then would we do with the results?
Now, for me, my proposal is those constituencies should be transmitted primarily to the Constituency Tallying Center. That's the electronic version.
Yes.
Because immediately you done the transmission, they follow up with the physical delivery.
That's where the forms come in.
Yes. That's when the forms come in.
Yeah.
The forms are coming with supporting ballots.
That's why we're all watching the TV at that point, and then we're saying it has gone to 2,000 like that.
That constituency, having received its results, that constituency, in my view, that constituency should proceed to declare and tell us these are our provisional results of the elections.
Because after all the individuals have signed off and have been counted.
And they're present.
Yeah.
Then we write, okay, for the constituency Bobasi, these are the numbers for each candidate. We close that chapter. We go to another constituency until the point when the threshold is met by a candidate. And anybody can now do the tallying in their own homes. So I can be sitting here with the city and Bobasi declares, we write on a full scarp. Somebody else declares, we write. Then we are able to tell at the end of it what are the votes for each of the candidates. You know, look at the American elections. You don't know who is the chairman of the election management body.
No,
you don't.
You don't.
And the elections are declared on a state
basis.
And you're able to tell, in fact, the president-elect in that country makes his acceptance speech and the loser concedes the elections before the election management body sits to formally declare who is the winner. Because the elections are held on November 20th. The EMB sits around December 4th. By that time, we have a president-elect.
And it's known.
It's accepted. Why? Because every state is able to come and declare, these are our results. So let's even superimpose that and use our constituencies as the equivalent of the states, parts of the elections. Let every constituency declare the results. And we are able to do the math. And if I have a dispute, for example, in the last election, why was I filing an election petition for the whole country? If there's a dispute, it's narrowed down to a particular constituency. Raila Odinga, for example, had no problem with the votes cast in Kisumu town constituency, West constituency. He had a problem with specific constituencies. But now, when he files a generic petition, he's even challenging those votes that are not disputed. The votes cast for him in Kisumu town central was not in doubt.
Was not in dispute.
It was not in dispute. So you should only file a dispute that, let's say, our problem is Tharaka Nithi. So that even if you resolve that dispute and to order for fresh elections, you see, it is narrowed to a particular locality. You are able to tell and you spare the country the ignominy of doing a repeat elections for everybody.
So, Willis, with all this that is glaring to be a no-brainer on what should be done, I mean, declaring the results at the constituency, it seems as though there is every intentional decision not to do that. Which one would ask? Why?
As I said, it's intentional because there's a group that wants to control that process. And there are people within the state, obviously, probably the intelligence services, political parties, who believe that we need to have a say and a control on the actual outcome of the elections. Hence the Bomas. Because at Bomas, you end up arguing over forms and figures without any supporting document. And even when we went to Supreme Court, I remember in the Supreme Court, one of the arguments we had raised was that let us be given all the Form 34As, Book A and Book B. And the court gave the order. The next day, the court reversed its order saying it's administratively impossible to get all the Form 34As. And then I said, okay, we'll take it for the disputed polling stations. And they brought. And almost 70% of the Book 2s had been used. And the Book A's, Book 1, could not be traced.
Okay. Would you put any kind of blame when we talk about the loss of accountability, even as we go to a break, loss of accountability of loss of fairness and transparency at the doorstep of the IEBC previously? And if so, what will we be looking at? Because now we're in a process to bring in essentially a new top level IEBC. And we say top level because of commissioners and chairperson. So if the blame was at the IEBC before, what can be done? Or would we say that, now that can actually be cleansed?
In fact, for me, the simplest thing that IEBC should do is take away this responsibility from themselves. Don't hoard this responsibility at the national level. Send it back to where it belongs, to the constituencies. And let the constituent returning officers conduct presidential elections, as we will watch like everybody else. If there's a dispute, we will come in and make the declaration at the constituency level. But do we have men and women of valor who are willing to cede power? Because to them also they become most relevant at the time. It's their time to load onto Kenyans that we are now your big boys. We are your masters. You must watch every 2 hours for us to come and read for you 2 constituencies, and you eat. New
chairperson is being vetted. Well, one of those who are being vetted will become the new chairperson of the IEBC. And then commissioners will come in too. It's always been contentious. Let's look at the last 20 years of elections in Kenya. The responsibility of announcing the results, and we take the presidential election. Rarely do people have trouble with the 1,000 and some other elections that take place. During an election in Kenya, during a general election, 1,060 something elections take place, because we're looking at members of the county assembly, we're looking at members of parliament, we're looking at senators, we're looking at governors, and then we look at the MCAs, and then we look at the president. But we only seem to have an issue with the presidential election. Yes, we do know that petitions are taken before court, but they pale in comparison to the vigor and vim that we see that people come and make noise about the presidential election. Of course, we can understand, because it's a big ticket position. And those who then would see that their person is in the seat then have something to gain. We don't doubt that. But what is it going to take to get away from this thing where every election is seeded in controversy, especially around the seat of the IEBC? We saw it with Sami Kivwitu in 2007. We saw it with Isaac Hassan. We saw it with Chebukati twice. Why?
But do we have a problem with the presidential election?
It seems to be the one that has the most contention. Look at everything that happened. What plunged Kenya into trouble in 2007 was not an MP in the middle of Rabat.
But I'm asking the question again. Do we have a problem with the presidential election?
Or do we have the process upon which the president is declared?
What is our problem really?
It's the results declaration. The polling itself has no problem. And in fact, part of the issues that we've raised in petitions that I've done, the 2017 and the 2022 petition, are just to buttress what Ndu was saying. You'll note, for example, in some constituencies, some counties, you take the total votes cast for governor, and total votes cast for the women reps, and the total votes cast for the senators. In a county, you see they all largely tally. Total votes cast.
Yeah, no problem, yeah?
Then the same county, you add the total votes cast for president,
and suddenly
there's discrepancies, because now you're being told that in County X, you want to tell me that 300,000 people walked into a polling station, or 20,000 people walked into a polling station, and were given
6.
Only they were not given all. They were only given they only cast for president and left 20,000 people in a county, because already in our electoral laws, in terms of once you walk into a polling station, you must be given all 6.
All 6. Yes.
And you must cast it, even if you do not desire to choose a candidate.
Write anything.
Even if you don't choose, you must cast it.
Yeah.
So that at the end of the process, when we'll be doing the counting, that vote will be marked as a spoiled vote.
Yes.
But the tally of the presidential must be the same as the tally for governor, the tally for senator, the tally for women rep. In that polling station, they must tally. So it's not feasible that in an election, like in 2017, it was ridiculous. You had almost over 500,000 people.
Only voting for president.
Just voting for president and walking out. It's not possible. That's what I'm telling you. The National Tallying Center.
Yeah, because we remember Supreme Court Judge now, Smoking Wanjala, asking that question in 2017 when he said, what happened to those other votes that did not vote for president? Where did they go? And that's why I'm saying there seems to only be a problem when it comes to the presidential part of all of this. And the question is why? Or are we saying the declaration? Because at the end of that court process in 2017, what was the ruling? The ruling was not that who won the election. The ruling was that the channel through which these things were transmitted has a fault. And that seems to have been the problem in 2007. It was the problem in 2012. It was the problem in 2017. It again is a problem in 2022. How?
And it remains a problem until the time when we decide as a country we are not going to have 7 people controlling our fate. Because our fate is determined at the ballot, at the polling station. And we are able to follow our polling station results to our constituency. And we can make our declaration. You can choose to call it provisional or whichever name you want to call it. But at that level, we should all know what the count is per constituency. And we can all do our math. Do you know how much the country spends at Bomas?
Ridiculous, man.
Just the entire technological aspect of these elections to set up Bomas. It's costing us almost not less than 7 billion.
What?
Yes. Setting up Bomas, that entire infrastructure of IT and all. In fact, 7 billion is a very conservative figure.
Breathe.
Yeah.
In and out.
You are setting up a very expensive
outfit
that you
so
don't
essentially
need.
For nothing.
For nothing. You don't need it. Because if the work has been done at the polling station and the constituencies, then why are you investing this heavy infrastructure on Otimofo, CG servers in France, CG everywhere?
Let me go on an example that you gave earlier to be able to ask a question. You talked about the American election, which we know is largely run by volunteers.
Yes.
And this election that took place in 2022, the volunteers that ran that election, very unlikely that they will be the volunteers who run the election then in 2026.
Yes.
It's you don't even know. But the thing is that you're looking at a system, essentially, that is, you go into the system, you do the thing, you get out. And that's why then you're able to count. Anybody can count, and you can declare a state. And that what is given to the media, across media, will tally. But here, sometimes we see that, okay, the numbers that we keep, that's what we do on election night, isn't it? That we keep going from channel to channel, and everybody's numbers are different.
Until it hangs.
Until now something happens, and then we're saying the number stops at, we just see 220,000, 220,000. It's not been moving for the last 6 hours, and we're saying, Krisha, it's over, we are dead, let's all go to Bomas, right?
Yes.
So what would it take, essentially, for you to have a system that is so sure, so watertight, that we put in 10,000, we're going to get out 10,000. And that an individual, Ndu, cannot go there and tinker with anything, call me Jose, cannot go there and tinker with anything, and then somebody will start asking questions about what happened. How can we get to that point whereby the IEBC is an overseer of the process to ensure will not be compromised, will not be somebody says, okay, they smiled at me in a certain way, will not have any. How can we get to that place?
Isn't that giving IEBC too much power?
Yes.
Which is what he said. They should just be an over.
Why should they oversee that process?
That's the point. You know, that's what I was saying, that IEBC has been arrogating unto itself power that it doesn't have. And by creating Bomas and investing huge resources, and even bullying media, because they've bullied media houses that don't declare any results. You have to come to Bomas, and we have to feed into our portal to get the results you are relaying. Such that when their system hangs, as it will hang anyway, because it must always hang.
Well, it has to hang. If it doesn't hang, it's not an election.
It's not an election, it must hang. When it hangs, the media, you are caught. You're also now hanging the whole country.
Yeah.
And yet, at the point of hanging,
We're even accused
I
that we
assure
have our own tallying center.
do you know the interesting thing about elections in Kenya is this? Having participated in elections, do you know that by midnight of the election night, there is not a single polling station that has not announced its results for president by midnight of elections night?
Meaning we should know.
We should know if we are serious. Because if polling closes at 5 p.m., let's give or take 1 hour to rearrange the polling station for recount, for counting.
Or
And
to
doing the
allow
closing
those who are
procedures.
already in the queue by 5.
By 5 to finish.
to
But of late, in fact, with the current the regulations, that 600 per polling station.
Yeah.
So normally, by close of business, there are very
done.
few. We are
Yes.
done. So setting up, rearranging the room for count and doing the closing procedures, give them 1 hour. Then it means by 6, the counting starts.
Can't start.
So let's say there were some delays, give them another 1 hour. 7.
Because
And
you're not calculating
you're not
anything. You're just
and-
counting 1,
and
2, 3.
And
like
remember,
that. Yeah.
you are only counting in respect to a maximum 600 ballots. Because each polling station
Can't take more than-
600. Now, there is no polling station that can count 600 ballots for more than 1 hour.
Even if we start now,
Even if we
we'll
start-
reach 600 by 8 o'clock.
8 o'clock.
Yes.
So it means that by 9, the whole country, the question of president has been sorted.
Done and dusted.
Now, it is the mischief of how to process the declaration of who it is. It takes you 7 days. And you must get a choir from Tanzania to come and
to sing
entertain
even
you.
when the ship is sinking.
Yes.
Yeah.
Then you wait, Siji, the system is hanging. Siji, wait for us to give provisional. We are trying to... It's all rubbish.
Seems.
But let me say this. If we wanted transparency in our elections, even to catch this national tallying center, one thing we must do, as I said, we must go to constituencies. Then, there's always this thing, now that we use the KIMS kits
Yes.
for identification of the voter. IBC, at the constituency level, should make declarations of the voter turnout every 2 hours. Because the information is right there.
Yeah.
In fact, this information should, as it comes to the system, as the voter is identified, we should be able to have a system where political parties or the candidates themselves are able to feed in. They can see.
But it's digitized, is it not?
It's
you go
digitized,
and
I'm
you
saying.
put
So-
your whatever
Yes, so
in the
everybody,
machine.
the information is there. So I should be able to know at any given time how many people have voted in this polling station or in these elections. What's the number? Because if you witness the last elections, in some parts of the country, when IBC attempted to declare the voter turnout, to disclose the voter turnout as at 2 p.m., you are seeing a return of less than 30%. Then all of a sudden at 5, those areas were now declaring 65% voter turnout. It is impossible. Human psychology, people primarily, most voters turn out early in the morning.
In the morning.
Yes.
Yeah. Then there's a lull during the day, and then
They
the
pick up a
latecomers
little
pick up
bit,
later,
yeah.
later
Just
in the-
before the
just
finish.
before.
Yes.
And that number cannot be more than the ones that came in the morning. It's impossible. So that whatever you are told, if by 2 p.m. you are told that you've had 30% voter turnout, you don't expect the voter turnout in that area to be more than 40%.
So my question keeps being then, what's the role of the IEBC in this process here? Because, I mean, sure, we know that they are the ones who hire the agents. They are the ones who hire all of these, the worker bees in this whole system. Those are then, they're not volunteers because they get paid something. They get this done. They're hired maybe for 1 month kind of thing. Now, to ensure that those numbers that are at the constituency, because we're talking about moving forward here, and we're in a process where a new selection is coming in, right? A chairperson will be selected soon. Commissioners will come in, and we're going to get the ball rolling. And the hope would be that you will not have the kind of confusion and drama, or even in some cases, orchestrated drama that we've seen before, and that once an election result is given, that Kenyans will actually say, right, this is an this makes sense. We're accepting of this result, and we're not going to have the drama that we did. So what would be the role of the IEBC today to ensure that this process that you're talking about actually happens? Who would be the one to say, actually, you know what, we don't need an NTC at Bomas or whatever. We will take the result from the CTC, and that is what will be given to Kenyans. It's not rocket science to put the thing together. Who would be the one to then make that declaration?
So it will require leadership from the commissioners to understand what their role is and to cede to the people what the dictates of the Constitution are in terms of transparency and accountability. But I don't want Kenyans to leave it to the commissioners. For the first time, this one we have to force the commissioners to respect the Constitution. Whoever is going to be, we must demand of him that we are not going to spend 12 billion shillings on an NTC when we can get our results on our own at the constituency tallying centers. So Kenyans need to make sure that whatever was decided in the Maina KI case is actually applied in the coming presidential elections. If you cede power to IEBC, remember, as it is now, look at the list of people who have applied for this job. You are seeing already, just from the short list, people holding brief for politicians. Yeah. People holding brief for politicians.
What does that mean, Willis?
They are there to serve political interests, parties and political interests.
Folks who are sitting on the selection panel?
No. I'm talking of the candidates. You can already see some of their candidates are holding brief for politicians. I mean, let's be honest. You can't tell me that you are very active party apparatchik, serving a political party, partisan interest. Now, all of a sudden, you want to become the chairperson of the electoral management body. I mean, you are going to be partisan. I'd rather, from the outset, we say, let political parties nominate commissioners so that we know each of us are coming with our partisanship. And then on the table, we are able to harmonize and find consensus on how to run elections. As opposed to pretend that you are independent, and yet the last election, you are inactive, you're standing on a political platform, campaigning for a political party. That should be a disqualification in my view. And more so, when that political party is going to be a key player in the coming elections. So we must call this out at the outset.
But Willis, what I find interesting is this. Let's start even with the selection of the interviewing panel.
Selection panel, yes.
Let's just move a little notch higher and look at the role that political parties have played in determining who is in the electoral panel. So this entire process at that level is already infected by political interests.
Correct.
So now, and the politicians seem to insist. What puzzles me and what I find interesting, they want to control this process from the very beginning. Why then do they complain?
Because they pretend that the commission is independent.
It's not independent.
It's not independent. The design of the commission is so that it will not be independent. If you asked me,
yes.
In fact, if you asked me, the best commission we should have is a commission that is nominated by political parties.
Yes.
From the outset, we know.
So we know.
We know that you are holding
brief for this party.
And then you sit in the room,
yes.
You harmonize your processes.
And it's okay. We understand why you're here.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm holding brief for my party, so let's agree on what can work for all of us as we are competing political parties. And that, to an extent, is what made the 2002 elections, in my view, possible. The people got their will. The commissioners that we had, Kivitu, Kanu had nominated 11 of them. The opposition had 10. It was known as partisan commission. But now on the table, they must all try to find a middle ground that can deliver a fair and fair election. What was the success, for example, of 2002 elections? By the time Kivitu was standing up to declare the results, the whole country knew Kibaki had won.
Yeah.
Because as the constituencies were declaring, the media was relaying. We were all able to do our math, our tally. The next day after the elections, the newspapers all had Kibaki at the front. Because we did the elections at the constituency levels and the constituencies declared them. So the hand of the commission was tied. In fact, Kivitu didn't even have a national tallying center.
No, he didn't.
No, he didn't.
He was doing the tallying in his boardroom. And he said, I've seen the results, I will announce for you. You to sit on a boardroom chair and declare the president. Now there's Chebukati and Ilk. 12 billion.
So would it be
As if you've never done.
So Willis, would it be disingenuous to say that to have a national tallying center essentially is a way to corrupt the results of the vote?
That is the sole intent of the National Tallying Center.
Could we say it's the tool used to predetermine the result you want?
Yes.
So essentially, we are saying it's pre-rigged.
Yes.
So the rigging, the existence of what we have is the system pre-rigged to determine an election in the direction that whoever decides the direction they want can. And it can work for anyone.
Yes.
So if we can sit here, 4 of us, this morning and have that conversation, then wouldn't it be clear to everybody else? It wouldn't take you 3 minutes to figure out that there's a problem here. That if you're okay here, the whole country, how many polling stations do we have in the thousands?
There are 40,000.
40,000.
290 constituencies.
290 constituencies, right? But somehow they're all able to do their job and do it well. Kenyans show up to vote, whether we like it or not. They say, I'm not going to vote, whatever. But people show up to vote. By and large, they do. Those who've been, fine. 2/3 of the registered are the ones who came to vote last election. Possibly you could get it to be more. But the election process itself usually goes on well. Smoothly. People come out, they vote, we finish the thing, people even sit in the lines, they chat, people bring chairs, people have drinks, whatever.
It's a very pleasant day, actually.
Isn't it? You're greeting people you never met before, you're doing the
and
business.
you're chit-chatting away with people as you come to vote,
But then a few hours later, the thing blows up into some rubbish. So if you can figure it out, that between the constituency and the National Tallying Center, there's a problem. We can sit here and see that. And we want to say we want to fix elections in this country. We want to make sure that everything is okay. If you listened to some of the interviews yesterday, that's one of the things that they said. Make sure that the election is going to be, prim and proper and all of that. If we can see that that's the problem, it seems like a no-brainer to me. Then remove the problem.
Well, the problem in this case would be remove the NTC, and take the declarations of the constituency as the final results.
So why wouldn't you want to do that? Yes.
Have you witnessed the disconnect we Kenyans have? I know the Nigerians have it, but us we have it.
Oh no, let's not even go there, because we can do some. Some serious problems.
The truth is patent; it's obvious.
It's clear.
But we will always go around it. We will avoid it. We will not say it. It's how we respond to the truth. It's not as though we don't know. No. If we were talking in an earlier hour of people who are deemed to be critics of the government or people who have joined the government are now being harassed by goons, a resurgence of goon squads. So, what is it? The criticism has to do with things which we know should be done but are not done. It's not as though we make them up. And that's the response.
And City, as we speak right now, the IEBC that the individuals will form the commission will be in place. So as we move forward towards the 2027 elections, as Kenyans, as stakeholders in the elections, what should we demand, including the fact that we have the Maina case that shows us what to do? What should we demand, because the elections are for the people of the Republic?
I think when it comes to the next election, and I draw inspirations from the June 25th occurrences, the Kenyan people must lay the roadmap for that elections themselves. This time, they should not leave it to politicians and IEBC to control that process. It must be an accepted national conversation on how we are going to conduct these elections, how we are going to make the declaration of results, and how it's going to be shared with us. If IEBC is going to deny media access, I believe this generation is going to use TikTok to declare that result. Because they'll be in the polling stations recording everything as it happens. You will see so many TikTok lives across the entire country, and everybody's going to do their tallying. So it is in the interest of the new commissioners to accept that we're in a new information age, and the games that they used to play before, they cannot play them going forward. And IBC must allow for transparent electoral processes, as was envisaged in our constitution and anchored in the Maina case.
Wow. Can it happen? Do you think that we have men and women worth their stuff, worth their metal, to be able to stand up and take the position right now? I mean, just look at look from the folks that are being, interviewed right now. Is there someone there who would then be able to stand up and say, actually, you know what? These are the problems that we've seen. And it's even giving us problems until today. And this is what we are going to do, essentially, to weed out that problem. Can we?
I mean, what should do, the selection panel should do Kenyans and honors. I mean, the partisans, the ones who've been actively engaging in political party activities, they should kick them out. They don't need to even waste time shortlisting them. Then, look for a man or a woman of valor. I'm not sure who that is in the list so far, but maybe they have hidden talents. But get someone who's courageous enough to say, this is what needs to be done, and I will do it. I'm not sure that list. So far, I don't get enough confidence from the list that we have. But maybe, I've said, maybe there is, and I'm waiting to be surprised. Maybe there is somebody within that list, because there are many people who applied.
Sure.
I'm sure there is somebody who may be convicted and say, on this one, I will do it for Kenyans. But the starting point in terms of confidence building for even Kenyans to believe you, you don't start from a point of, I was an ODM Damu. Now I want to become chairman. Now I want to be the Independent Electoral Mandate Commission chairman. Let's be serious. If you are ODM Damu, kakando. If you are UDA Damu, kakando. At least let's pretend. Let's look for that one who was not Damu. Because these ones who always say, Kanu Damu, then ODM Damu, Nak Damu. This Damu, when do they do transfusion? You have to cleanse it from the previous party you were Damu of before. So let's be clear. Get somebody who at least has not shown open partisanship. Or, if they are choosing partisans, they should say, we are choosing this one as UDM Damu as chairman. Then for commissioners, this one was ODM Damu, this one was Wiper Damu, this one, bring them now as partisans from the beginning. That we all know these lists of commissioners are representing partisan political interests. Let them find accommodation. Let them find consensus once they're set up.
Willis Otieno, thank you. Stuff for us to think about and hope for, that we will actually see some changes when it comes about, because it's clear across the board there is no satisfaction with the way things have been handled. And going into another election in just under 2 years, necessary, just over 2 years now, and necessary for us to have those. And we want to thank you for sharing those insights with us this morning. Asante sana.
Thank you very much, Andrew.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.